Okay, so I'm assuming you're watching this because for some reason you're worried about type 2 diabetes. You might have had a shock, the bombshell might have hit, you might have got a text message from your doctor, maybe you've seen someone close to your family. Something's happened that has made you think, uh-oh, I'm really worried. Suddenly, you're actually seeing reality. This is like a wake-up moment, and it means that you're really seeing real life and something that you've been maybe ignoring for years. I'd ignored it for decades. And the first thing you kind of feel is this overwhelm, and you just think, what can I do? That, you know, I've tried dieting before, this ain't going to work. So I just want to say that you don't necessarily need to change who you are. Yes, you do need to a bit more be on it, but it's not quite the same as being on a diet that's all or nothing. So this is all around helping you see that there's maybe another way to go. So the first thing is the reality of type 2 diabetes. It's a terrible disease. It affects so many of your organs because it's basically your blood's not happy and your blood touches everything. It's not something that happens to other people until it happens to you, and then you realise it happens to everyone. It's something that's growing massively. It's nothing to do with you. It's more a lifestyle disease, and that's because of modern life. Now, the first thing that crosses your mind when you kind of come to this crossroads in your life there's basically two options. I keep my head in the sand, keep ignoring it until something really serious happens, or I go on a diet. And it's basically business as usual or a miserable diet. I'm not going to stop and read the slides out. You can pause them if you want to read them. But one of the things that you need to understand is that diets don't work, not because they functionally don't work, but because they're not based on how we feel. So they don't work because they don't make you happier. That's the reason they fail. But each one of them actually has a positive side to them, something about them that's really good, and a trick that we can use when you use them together. So for example, keto, you know, nobody wants to give up chips and crisps, but actually having an evening meal which has a lot less carbs in it is quite a good way to ensure a bit of a better fast. Fasting, it's a great concept, but you have to endure hours of hunger. Weight Watchers, again, it's a brilliant idea that you pre-measure portion sizes, but what do you tend to do? You end up eating the same meal every day, and it gets boring. Even Noom, one of the more modern diets, it's based on psychology, but it doesn't allow for real life, which is continual failure. And what this does is it makes a toxic mindset. That's what it really does. It creates in our heads a toxic mindset, and that's actually the worst bit of the diet, because it affects us even when we're off it. So even when we're off it, we feel bad when we're eating nice tasting food. Diets, they're just associated with misery because it feels like we have to give up the whole of our lifestyle. We have to change who we are, and they're big effects. And on top of that, a lot of times they don't actually work, in that you're in the middle of them, you're trying your hardest, and then at the end of the week you come to weigh yourself and the weight hasn't gone down. And so it's a really difficult kind of hope and pray technique, where when you're very on it and you build your lifestyle around it, it does tend to work better. But as soon as you try and bring it back into your lifestyle, it basically fails. Now the reason weight loss is so hard is because your body resists it. We've been built for hundreds of thousands of years to kind of store fat when we get it, because normally food is scarce. Now in our modern society, food is the opposite of scarce. We have an abundance of it. So your body resists weight loss because it's programmed to store fat. So every opportunity, when there's a bit of excess, it will store it, and it enjoys storing it, and it thinks it's doing a good job. So that's why it's so hard to lose weight. And not only that, your brain kind of encourages you to do things which help you store fat. So all the time you're being pulled mentally towards the comforts, eating easy food, and so you have to have real strength to kind of keep pulling against those forces. And the best way to do that is not to use brute force, but to actually use a bit of intelligence. And so the way I like to think of it is by making two key changes. One of them is to step away from the diet cycle where you just lose weight, put weight on again, lose weight, put weight on again. This kind of cycle that inevitably we're putting on weight for much longer than we're losing weight is what we need to stop. And you need to think about being more healthy generally. That doesn't mean you give up nice food, you give up binging, you give up stuffing your face. No, it just means that we try and balance it out more, and that on average we're healthier. Feels scary, but actually it's a lot easier than a diet. But if we focus more on the long term, then we don't worry so much about the blips, even if they're days, weeks, months. If we're still heading in that direction, still trying to do it, then we're going to get there eventually. And the second most important point is that we need to make the system easier. Most diets are just a piece of bureaucracy, really. They're barriers that we put in the way of the day that make it even harder, and what we really need is a system that flexes in our life, not the other way around. So the revolutionary approach to balance is basically to do less, do the absolute minimum you can. Now that sounds lazy, but when you think about it, when do we fail on a diet? Well, it's normally a few months in, when we've got back to normal life. Normal life starts taking control again. We haven't given up everything to go to the gym. We've brought all the day-to-day things back in, and we haven't got time for them. So at that point then, at your lowest point, that's when the diet needs to be doable. So we really need to focus on doing less, and I call this finding your edge. So if you think about when you're eating all the food you love eating, you put on weight. That's fine. When you go on a diet, you definitely do lose weight. So the question I want to know is what is the minimum we need to do to kind of find our edge? Where do we need to get to be able to not put on weight, but on the most part kind of control our weight? And that's what finding your edge is, finding your balance point. What is that balance? So just to confirm, really, balanced is all around common sense. This is about helping you to find your self-motivation. You don't need a doctor, you don't need a scientific review. This is common sense stuff that just makes sense to you. And what we believe is really simple, that modern life has confused our body and life, our body and mind. And that actually when you retune, when you calibrate yourself, when you ground yourself back in your body, you can gain back control and succeed where previously you've failed. Even if chronically you've failed, actually you can gain a level of more balanced success when you look longer term and you tune back into your intuition. So the real truth is that if you want to succeed long term, you need to uncover your truth. And what I mean by that is it's actually an experiment. So a lot of times when we go on a diet, we want accountability, or we want to be told what to do. That doesn't actually help us. It only helps us short term, and what we really need is to find our own balance, our own edge, because each person's edge is different. And the way to think of this is to think about, for example, when you were a baby or a toddler, obviously you won't remember, but when you think about toddlers learning to walk, who taught them to walk? Who actually taught them the how to put one step in front of the next and to make progress? Now, instinctively say it's your parents, but actually they didn't teach them, they motivated them. They gave them incentives, they rattled their toys or stood in front of them and made happy faces. And it was actually the child that has to actually get up off the floor and start putting one step in front of the next. And that's the piece that gives you intuitive eating, intuitive weight control, intuitive happiness. It's that balance, it's learning yourself. That's the key difference. Once you start to learn yourself what your body needs, that's when you can start detaching from the type of food you're eating more, and you can manage your weight whilst eating lots of different types of food. A diet goes completely the opposite way around. It tackles the symptom and gives you a very rigid set of rules, and tries to tell you exactly what to do. And it's a bit like using a handrail to get around all the time. But the problem is you have to follow the handrail. It's inflexible. So this is about you finding your edge. The great advantage here is that you can ignore lots of other advice. So in fact, in the first 3 weeks, when you're just trying to find your true hunger, we actually advise you to do nothing else. So no turning vegan or plant-based, no adding extra exercise, just try and find your true hunger and see if that makes a difference, because that is probably the maximum you're going to be able to do when you have another life event that kind of leaves you falling on the floor and needing comfort. And I think the thing to remember is, and again, just like learning to walk, no one else but you can feel what your body needs, and you must listen to your body. That is the key to this success, learning to hear when your body really is hungry, because it's actually our hunger that is kind of holding us back. And the real empowerment is that you go from kind of feeling like, you know, you're not emotionally strong, you struggle with motivation, you hate diets, you've got no time, you've got this negative kind of self-talk, and once you find your edge, you actually turn into someone who is then enjoying life more. It's nothing to do with superficial weight gain, weight loss. That's great, you feel great because of it, and obviously you're healthier because of it, but that's not the real benefit. The real benefit is that you feel happier. I mean, a fundamental happiness, a strength, a mental and physical strength, grit and determination, which just enables you to enjoy life more. And it turns you from someone who feels overwhelmed by the wave that's coming along, and instead you're surfing on top of it because you're more in control. And it's that concept of, it's the same sea, you haven't changed your life, you're in the same life, but it's a different perspective because you're in control. Now, the way that we approach this is this simple as 3-2-1 plan, and what that is about is basically kind of intuitive weight control, and it's about learning 3 key elements. We're focusing on 2 outcomes. To do that, we're using one method, and these very simple concepts that you can learn quite quickly, they're the kind of framework, and on top of that you use lots of resets that help you to work around your own blockers in your life, whether you can't eat food in the day because you're a hairdresser, or because you have to eat certain food because you're going out in the evening. Whatever it is, you've got the resets to help you work around it. So we're going to look into these 3 elements a bit more, but you're going to learn about your blood sugar hunger. So this is your true hunger, listening for your true hunger, the key to stopping the type 2 diabetes, which is the carbs loading your sugar, loading your blood. You can learn about the willpower battery, which is learning how to kind of store up willpower for use later. So when you're feeling strong, store up some willpower, and then when you need it, when you have to eat the right thing, it's already there. And then finally the diabetes drip, and this is the concept that helps you to really understand when to push and when to not push so hard on eating bad food when you're feeling strong enough. So those 3 elements will really help you to understand what you need to do. The 2 outcomes we're focusing on are really simple. We're going to reduce the chance of fat storage in the day, an absolute number 1 thing we're going to do, and then increase the chances of fat burn at night. And the whole system is brought together with a really simple concept called microfasting, which is the benefits of intermittent fasting, which is kind of you eat what you're currently eating, but just without any of the hunger. If we look at the first of 3 elements, the blood sugar hunger, what you'll find is that modern food, because it's so calorie dense, so think of a tiny Mars bar now, they're almost fun size now, that has the same number of calories of a massive kind of tree of broccoli. Now, if you think of how long it takes you to eat the piece of broccoli, how much digestion it will take you, that Mars bar has been completely processed. It's nearly 1/3 as efficient as petrol, just to give you an idea. So as soon as you eat that Mars bar, it goes straight through your system and it goes straight into your blood. So normal food is breaking our digestion system and our bodies, and this is the cause of the weight gain. So it's not that we're broken, it's just that modern food is confusing our body. And the other thing is that our hunger signals are also being confused, so you have to tune into the right hunger signal. But once you ground yourself, once you calibrate yourself to that hunger, it becomes really easy, and it actually becomes almost effortless, because your body tells you when you need to eat. if we then look at the willpower battery, so this is a concept where we use planning instead of having to have willpower 24/7. So we plan our kind of breakfast and lunches, and the way we do that is we make pots up, and there's various tricks you can use, but you're basically doing some effort when you're not hungry, so that the moment you are hungry in the morning when you wake up, your breakfast is literally 1 minute away from being ready. You eat it, it's portioned, and you go on and you're happy. And actually, when you eat that food at the right time and you eat a right size portion, it makes you feel happier and rebuilds your willpower. So a traditional diet's difficult because it's so hard to have the willpower 24/7, but when you're eating when you're hungry, and like I say, and you use your willpower battery, it actually reinforces itself. It gives you more willpower and it makes you want to succeed for longer. So this kind of almost rebuilds it, it recharges your battery. And then the kind of the key concept is this diabetes drip. And what I want you to think about is when you're eating food that is not whole food, wholesome food, vegetables, meat, things that are unprocessed in any way, not mechanically processed. So things that are mechanically processed, bread, pasta, pastries, any sweets, jams, all of these kind of things, they're really high in carbohydrate, and they've been processed. They've been almost pre-digested. That's the way to think of them. What happens is, as you eat them, they almost go straight through your body, straight into your blood. So this is the concept of the diabetes drip, that when you eat refined carbohydrates, you try and make the portion smaller than normal. And this helps you to avoid the fat dumping that happens if you eat too many rapidly digestible carbohydrates in one go. Now, when we follow these three concepts, what we're actually doing is we're balancing these two outcomes. So when we are eating when we're hungry, what that means is we're eating when our stomachs are less full. So there's less chance of us overloading food. We're also eating as soon as we're hungry. So again, we're stopping the kind of, when you eat when you're ravenous, you end up eating too many calories. So all of that and a focus on reducing the amount of carbohydrates does help to reduce the chances of fat storage in the day. And then the other thing we try and do is increase fat burning. Well, fat burning happens at night when you're fasting. So from the last meal you have, the last food you eat, to the first time you eat in the morning, that period of time is fasting. And what we want to do is maximize that period to a point where we're not feeling miserable and hungry like intermittent fasting, where you have 16 hours of no eating, but probably try and get it to 12, 13, 14. And the way we do that is we have our evening meal a little bit earlier, say 6 o'clock. That means by the time you're going to sleep at night, you're probably already a bit hungry, and that's perfect. You go to bed, you wake up in the morning, you're hungry, and you have your breakfast at 8 o'clock, say, and that's then 14 hours. And also, it's super efficient because the last meal hasn't been massive. When you intermittently fast, you tend to eat much bigger portions, so that actually makes the overnight fat burn less efficient. So we're really optimizing the whole thing to reduce fat storage and increase the chance of fat burning. Now, the way the method works is really simple, and I'm going to give you the rules of it in a second. They're literally 3 rules, and you can learn them in 10 seconds. But this is what's kind of happening in your body and how you're going to feel it. So imagine we start at 6 o'clock at night. We've just had our average sized dinner. That now your body is in fasting mode. Now, it'll take hours for your body to actually work through all the spare calories in your body that are ready to be used instantly. And maybe at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, that's when all of the spare calories have been used up, and you'll start to dip into your fat stores. So this point here, the lock on the right hand side at 5 o'clock, that's when, for example, fat burn might start, and that's unlocking that fat burning. And at that point, then your body's going to use up a little bit of fat, a couple of grams of fat. You wake up in the morning and you are absolutely ravenous, really hungry. So that's a real point where you have to be a bit careful. You need to eat your normal breakfast, and then what I normally do is I would have, for example, my porridge or my shake, and then I'd have a hot cup of coffee, which helps to slow me down and just gives my body time to then turn off the hunger. But that is what we call microfasting. So each time we eat, we wait then until we're hungry again before we eat again. But as soon as we're hungry, we eat. So the difference with intermittent fasting is, with intermittent fasting you have to wait 16 hours whether you're hungry or not, but with our system, as soon as you're hungry, you know you've been successful, and then you get to eat again. So this is the mechanism where we're creating happiness, because we're associating good behaviour with eating food. So all throughout the day you eat food, you then have a fast where you don't eat anything, you feel hungry, and as soon as you're hungry you then have either a snack or a meal depending on what time of the day it is. Now, in terms of what you have to do, the micro fasting, this is literally it. If you just follow these 3 rules, it is likely, I mean, at the very least you will feel freer in your mind, and you'll start to feel less bloated, and you'll start to feel much more kind of awake in the day, and at best you'll start to lose some weight literally by just following this. So if you're not hungry, then don't eat. That's rule number 1. Every time you think to yourself, shall I get something from the cupboard, you think, am I hungry? If you're not hungry, just say, no, I'm not going to eat it. Now, as soon as you feel hungry, and this is about a 4 out of 10. So if you think of like getting really hungry is like 7 or 8, you're hearing it as soon as you're a little bit hungry. Now, if you've just had a meal and 30 minutes later you're hungry, that's not real hunger. Okay, but this takes time to kind of tune into. But what happens is, as soon as you feel hungry, you eat a slightly smaller portion than you used to eat. So again, we're not starving ourselves, 100% we're not starving ourselves, and in fact, if you want, you can just reduce your carbohydrate and add more veg on if you need to feel full. But it's about kind of eating a little bit less calories. That's the idea behind it. And then as soon as you've done that, then you're not hungry again, and you carry on doing that throughout the day. Now, if you say to me, it gets to a point I just can't do it, that's where the 3rd rule comes in, and that's the best one of all, because if you can't follow rules 1 or 2, just enjoy your food. And this is the piece that none of the other diets have, the fact that it is inevitable that we're going to keep failing. So that's the really positive point. If you can't follow rules 1 and 2, just enjoy your food. This is something you could start now. So I'm pretty sure you can remember those rules, and I'm pretty sure that unless you've got a wedding in the next few hours or something really important you can't miss, you could actually start and say, from now on, I'm just going to follow those rules. Until I'm hungry, I'm not going to eat. As soon as I'm hungry, I'm going to eat a slightly smaller portion, and then, if I want to have something, then that's fine. It's just that as soon as you feel like it, you're back on it again. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is why this works so well in comparison to other diets, because at the end of the day, every single diet, every single weight loss involves taking fat from your body and burning it, and the reality is your body fights it. So no matter which system you use, you have to go through kind of mental pain to actually get there, because your body doesn't want to do it. Now, on a traditional diet, what happens is in the day you have great periods where you're hungry, where you're uncertain, for most diets. Something like keto, you're not necessarily hungry in the day, but you are mentally constrained because you have to eat specific foods. So there's a lot of kind of, for someone that is a comfort eater like me, it's really hard to go on a diet. And that's what I call the kind of normal diet example here, in that it just feels like you're sprinting the whole day. It's really hard work. The difference with balanced is that what we do is, in the day, we try and make our lives easy by having this micro fasting. So being able to eat as soon as we're hungry means we're not hungry for big periods of time. We haven't massively changed our food, so actually the effort's quite easy in the day. And the great thing is that we set ourselves up to actually do a lot of the work when we're asleep, and that's the really great thing. So when we're asleep, that's when all the pain goes on, so we don't feel it as much as a normal diet, and that's a real it's a real benefit, that because it just makes it feel so much easier in the day, and it does feel effortless. It really does. Now, the real disadvantage of this system, balanced, is that with a traditional diet, they tell you what to do. They tell you what to do every day. That makes it easier to learn a normal diet, but it's a lot less inflexible. Whereas in this system, you have to learn a little bit, you have to experiment with yourself a little bit and find your edge. But once you've learnt it, it's much easier to use because it's flexible and you can work around it. In terms of kind of some feedback I've had on the system, one of the funniest ones was a lady that I spoke to just on the phone a couple of times, and then 6-7 weeks she completely ghosted me. I'd write to say how you doing, how things going, and just nothing back. And in the end, she wrote this message on the right, and basically said she'd ghosted me and just followed the rules, and she'd lost £6 or £7. So it really is a system that is so simple. You can just kind of start it just by following those 3 rules. So if you'd like to find out a bit more, then please head over to the Balanced Facebook page. We've also got a group which is called the Plan to Beat Diet Misery in Type 2 Diabetes. Come along and sign up to that, and that's got a guide in it that will help you take those first few steps. So I'm Tom. It's been nice to chat to you. Hopefully we'll chat some more, and speak to you soon.